So we are going to get started. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you're here with us tonight. I'm Dinan Messiqua, and I'm president of the board for the International Dyslexia Association Massachusetts branch. And with me are Joanna Christodoulou and Kendra McCuine, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hello, I am Kendra McCuine. I'm the secretary of the International Dyslexia Association Massachusetts branch. And Joanna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanna Christodoulou. I'm also a board member of Massachusetts branch of IDA, and I also have a role at the MGH Institute of Health Professions as a professor studying reading difficulties. Great to be with you all tonight.
So tonight's webinar will have two parts. In the first part, Joanna will share with you what we know about summer outcomes with regards to reading from a research perspective. And in the second part, Kendra and I will share with you practical strategies that you can use to support your child's summer reading at home. If you have, before I say that, we will be posting the slides of tonight's webinar on our website in the next few days. So all of this information you will have access to on the IDA Massachusetts website under resources. And if you have any questions tonight, please put them in the Q&A tab, not the chat feature, or please don't raise your hand, because what we have found to be the most efficient is that if you put your questions in the Q&A, we will do our best at the end. We're going to leave some time for a Q&A session to answer your questions. Joanna is going to start us off. And as she said, Joanna is an associate professor at the MGH Institute of Health Professions. She's also the director of the Brain Education and Mind Lab. And she has done extensive research with regards to what happens to children's reading brains in the summer. So Joanna, you can lead us off, and yes, excited to share all of this information with you all.
Thank you so much, Dinan, and welcome everyone again. Great to have you here with us. So our focus is on maybe your favorite season as well. But as we all face the new season upon us as the school year comes to a close, I want to give you some context for what is this time period? How did we get here? And what do we know about the science of reading and reading development as it unfolds outside of school time, especially during this extended period? So the thing about summer that we could just converge on is that most students have the school years that break up for these extended periods of time, these summer breaks that usually last 2 to 3 months or so. And I would love to hear if this is true for you, but many educators, parents, practitioners, and community members and stakeholders would say that the conversation about summer slide is when they're very familiar with. And what I mean by that is the idea that students end the school year with their reading skills or other domains being a certain way, and then by the end of the summer, those skills have not been as sharp as they were at the end of the school year, or their scores are not as high as they left them off in the previous school year. So this whole idea of the summer time being a potential period of vulnerability for reading skills is where I want to draw our focus. Now, many times when we have educational challenges, one of the issues is how do we get the resources, the programs, and the focus on that challenge. And the good thing about the summertime is there are so many community offerings that are all around summer development, summer reading development through activities or programming or camps with a little bit or a lot of a focus on reading. So by that, I want to highlight that for many of the options we want to consider, many communities have programs that could be really helpful and supportive of thinking about the reading development of our students. But in contrast to having a lot of programs already developed for lots of people, and in addition to this conversation of summer slide being so common, surprisingly, there is very little research on the nature of reading development during the summertime when kids are having very different experiences and usually don't have formal schooling. So on the next slide, it's a bit of context to offer you. What are the terms and how do we think about what happens in the summer? Now, the first thing I'll say is when we talk about summer and then fill in the blank for any of these words that follow, we are not expecting academic skills to grow at the same rate when you're out of school for a long time as when you're in school during the school year. So the idea of skills kind of growing a little slower or having some pullback from the rate of progress kids are having in the school year is pretty commonly expected because the intensity, the structure, the resources, and the people available to support students reading during the school year are all readily available, in contrast to the summer when students' experiences with literacy can vary across a very wide range. So from that perspective, the idea of not growing your reading as much or less than the school year is less of the issue. The main issue that the summertime is an area for us to focus on when we think about struggling readers is because it's an opportunity for closing gaps, not for trying to chase the same progress you'd have in school that everybody benefits from. So let me unpack that a little bit further. In the Northeast, at least, we let out school lets out in June, and then we get students back in September. In other parts of the country, the timeline shifts a little bit. And when we talk about students' skills in reading not growing at the same pace or not looking the same as when they ended school the previous year, the kinds of phrases you might hear are things like summer slide, summer slump, summer setback, summer regression. Interestingly enough, in the time of COVID, the summer framework is it has been used in parallel to talk about COVID slide, COVID slump, et cetera. So a lot of what we're talking about in the COVID world is very much drawn from the world of the summer context. Some kids, if they start September with the skills not as sharp as the previous school year, we talk about that performance in the red. But for other kids, they might start off where they left off, and we might call that summer glide or summer maintenance. And then for some kids, they can use the summer as a time to infuse their experiences with rich literacy experiences, rich language experiences, rich experiences in the world, building their background knowledge. And we might call those cases summer gain, growth, or progress. So from that context, on the next slide, I want to give a little bit of context about how did we even get to the schedule that we currently have for summer vacation. And this might be true for you. The most common idea that people share is, well, that's when there aren't as many farming responsibilities. And when we think back early on, before we were in our current era, so many more families were involved in agriculture. And therefore, since the summertime was the least busy time in agricultural society, that must be why we didn't have school then, so that children could support farming responsibilities otherwise. So let me just read this piece for you explicitly. Summer vacation originally was required so that children could support farming responsibilities in agricultural society. That is the misconception, because on the next, if you advance the next one, we're going to actually get some clarification. So farming was not the reason why we have summer off. Instead, farming responsibilities are actually all year round. There's never really a break from agricultural life. And in the 1800s, schooling was commonly held during the summer, but not for everyone. If you advance slides twice, you will see that there were two things that happened. Urban communities had school in session for 11 to 12 months of the year, in contrast to students from rural or farming communities that were only in school 5 to 6 months in total, distributed throughout the calendar year. In other words, their experience was less consistent and less intensive than urban peers. And so the decision to have summer vacation as we currently know it was to try and have equal footing for all students in terms of their academic experiences. So they turned down the calendar for urban and turned up the calendar intensity for those from rural settings. And here we are embarking on a new summer vacation, still consistently going from the model, trying to equalize experiences for students from different contexts. So on the next slide, I'll give a little bit more context on what is the summer slide exactly and how do we think about it. So as I mentioned before, when we think about this summer slide, it's essentially describing when students might slow down or stall or fall back in their academic skill development during the summer. And I say academic there because it's been looked at from the perspective of reading, but also reading's good sibling, math, and very less so for writing. So our cluster of the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, are under that umbrella of academic skills. Now, if you ask how much learning loss is there, and is it learning loss? From the research side, there really has been the most focus on this question of summer slide from the angle of socioeconomic status. And that is a metric of how many resources financially, socially, et cetera, a family might have, because that is a proxy for the kinds of programming children may have access to, or the kinds of access you might have to clinicians, or what you can afford, or how many books are in your home. And so the estimates of summer slide are inconsistent and probably quite unhelpful to us. Some studies have said it's 2 weeks, others 3 months. So not much convergence there. And lots of factors from the research end have complicated how people have had the chance to measure summer slide. So 2 main categories have been part of how people have tried to understand summer slide and have found these variables matter. So let me explain that a little bit. One reason why people have not converged on understanding what happens during the summer to our academic skills is partly attributed to the kinds of tests used and how hard the items are and how they are scored. So I won't say a lot more about that, but I'll have that as a placeholder to acknowledge it. And then the other cluster of things people have found as important for deciding just how much summer slide is there and who has it has been focused on student factors. So let me break that down for us. Around student factors, we can explore the story of the summer by different academic areas. Some people have found evidence that the math summer slide may actually be worse than the reading summer slide. And just to give that a moment of attention, even though we're focusing on reading here, literacy at least is built into the fabric of so many home environments. We have books, we model books, we talk about our experience with literacy, we showcase it. And math may not have the same advantage. We may not talk about the math we do or do math activities and highlight just how prevalent math is in the fabric of our lives, but it's not acknowledged or used or celebrated in the same ways as reading in many homes. The other area to think about is socioeconomic status, which I mentioned before. And some early research showed that if you are from more vulnerable or lower socioeconomic status, you are more likely or prone or vulnerable to summer slide. And I'll unpack that more in a moment. Of course, what you do in the summer will matter. So your reading habits will have a big influence on that story. And finally, grade. So when we are developing our reading skills, we are growing those the most in early elementary school. So a rule of thumb I think about is the more we have to learn, the more we have to lose or become vulnerable on. So children, especially in the early grades, are growing their skills the most. They're laying that foundation down. So they're more vulnerable to things like COVID slide or summer slide. So on the next slide, that just sets the picture for when we think about our literacy experiences. It's really at this intersection these days between the summer slide question, the COVID slide question, and just more generally how our students who have reading difficulties are often trying to close gaps with their peers. So the next slide gives us a bit of a framework for the why behind this all. And if you advance the slide 2 or 3 more times for some bubbles to come up, you'll see that when we talk about the why of the summer, what we're seeing is we have this analogy of a faucet. During the school year, imagine a faucet analogy is the faucet is running, it's got ample water to flow, and it's accessible to all kids. All kids are going to school, they have structure, books, resources. We know not all schools are equal, but in the school setting, let's kind of say that it's consistent at least. In the summer, you can imagine that that faucet can come down to a bit of a trickle, and the degree of that trickle will really depend largely on what choices the family and the student make for what their summer experience with literacy is like. So this comes down to the kinds of material resources you might have access to or use, the nature of your reading experiences. So I highlight these points just to have a visual analogy. And on the next slide, I want to end with this slide before we transition to some very practical tips for you, to say that SES, or socioeconomic status, is the most well-studied angle of the summer story, and it's still not consistent in what research has found. I think for our focus, our research team has studied the summer slide in students with reading disabilities, and we have some preliminary evidence that it's a vulnerability to step into the summer with reading difficulties without a lot of attention spent on fostering and the growth of our readers. So I want to focus on this idea of a home literacy environment. While a lot of the research has been on socioeconomic status in the summer, what actually matters more than socioeconomic status, in other words, how much education or how much income parents in the home may have, is your home literacy environment. And what that means is essentially the resources, interactions, and attitudes in the home. So resources, that comes down to, are you able to access the library? Are you able to access audiobooks? Are you able to have books around the home for easy reading? Are those books available to students that are aligned with their interest and their reading level and so forth? Another one is the interaction. So is there a set time every evening to spend 20 minutes reading the same story together, or talking about books, or how it made us feel, or what made us think about, or what we learned? And attitudes, how people in the home showcase their perspectives or their feelings about things like reading is setting a model for how students absorb that and try that on for themselves. So for in the math world, people might say, oh, I don't do math. I'm not a math person. Sometimes people might say that for reading, but it's not as common. But our attitudes, our interaction, our resources are all opportunities to foster the growth of reading in the summertime when we are not in formal schooling, and the home setting is the foundation from which opportunities in the summer comes from. So I look forward to sharing any answers to questions you may have, and I will pass the baton to Dinan and Kendra for part 2.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for that very helpful presentation about summer reading. And now we're going to move on to the second part of our talk, which is I'm going to focus on practical strategies that you can use at home to support your child's summer reading. Kendra and I were both former special education teachers and have worked with children and parents, and we're going to be sharing sort of tools from our toolkit that we have seen to be really helpful for families working with children. So the first thing that's really important with regards to any kind of work that you are going to do with your child during the summer is, we know that reading and spelling and writing can be really tiring for children, especially children who struggle with dyslexia and who struggle with reading and writing. So you really want, there's two things that are important. You want any activity that you do to feel manageable for the child. And what I often say to parents that I work with is less is more. Because if the task is something that the child is able to do, and they might have to struggle a little bit, but if it's at their sort of what we call instructional level or even their independent level, the child's going to feel a sense of accomplishment and success. If it's at their frustration level, if the task feels unmanageable and too big or too hard, you're going to get shut down from your child. The other piece is that the work really needs to be, especially for younger children, needs to be given to them in smaller chunks because you want to avoid burnout. And it's better to do a little bit every day, like 10, I mean, depending on their age, and I'll talk about that in a few slides about what I recommend in terms of the age and how much time you should spend on literacy activities every day. But generally, smaller chunks is better. It's better to do, 15 minutes a day, and do it every day than try to do like an hour or an hour and a half, and then the kid is frustrated and doesn't want to do it anymore. So you really want to think of reading as a muscle, just like when we exercise. It's better to go to the gym, half an hour a day, and then go to the gym for, an hour every other week. It's just like a muscle. A little bit every day goes a long way. And now I'm going to pass it on to Kendra.
Hello. So as the facilitator of your summer home learning environment and kind of your child's trainer in building this muscle, we wanted to first, before we give you sort of some practical activities to build those muscles, we want to share a very reputable model among reading instructors and researchers. And now you, as the facilitator of your home learning environment for the summer, are invited into understanding this model as well. So reading is, it's simple, but it's very complicated as well. This model kind of shows us the components that go into our goal of developing skilled readers. So you can see on the right-hand side in that gray box, skilled reading. That's our goal. Our students are fluent, they can comprehend, they can decode fairly effortlessly. On the left, we have sort of a set of skills that go into skilled reading. And these are broken into two categories. Language comprehension, which is on the top and is represented by the red and orange portion of the rope, and word recognition, which is at the bottom and is represented by the blue and green portion of the rope. So what word recognition means is that your child is decoding. They're seeing a word printed on the page and they're turning it into spoken language, either out loud or in their head. This is what a lot of our children's instructional programs in school focus on, especially with dyslexic students, where they're understanding how to literally get words, lift words off of the page from print. Super duper important. And you can see at the bottom, sort of in the middle section, it says we want those to become increasingly automatic. So that's one aspect of reading that we certainly want to address in our home learning environments over the summer. That is absolutely necessary for skilled reading, but word recognition is not sufficient on its own. The other component that we need is language comprehension. So these are the skills that go into reading comprehension. And these are built through sort of a different set of exercises than word recognition skills are built through. So these involve building your child's background knowledge, their vocabulary, their understanding of sentence structures, and we'll give you ways to build these as well, which can be pretty simple and pretty fun. So what we really want to see is that these two sides of the rope come together and build skilled reading. And if you advance the slide, I'll just give you a preview of what's to come in the activities that we're going to show you. We've kind of sorted them into these two categories of decoding or reading the words and language comprehension or understanding the words. So you'll see some activities involving phonological awareness or an awareness of the sounds in words. We'll talk about decodable books and how to get your hands on some good ones, as well as some games and some online programs. On the language comprehension side of things, or the understanding of the words, we'll tap into audiobooks, read alouds, and trade books, which is just a fancy way of saying books that are not written to be decodable. They're books you would pick up off the shelf at the library. One question I get asked pretty frequently is are audiobooks and read alouds okay for my child? Are they going to build skills? And the answer is absolutely, absolutely yes. Your child, if they're not reading at grade level, they should be listening to books so that they can build those language comprehension skills in addition to working on their decoding skills, which may be below grade level. You can advance the slide.
Thank you. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot by parents when I work with parents is, how much time should I be spending on literacy skills with my child every day in the summer? And this is sort of a table that I've developed from my consulting work, working with parents and working with children, that I've found to be helpful. And what I found is that, the younger the child, you're going to spend less time, and the older the child, you're going to spend more time. And what I found is with children ages, 5 to 7, you're looking at about 10 to 30 minutes a day. Now, obviously that varies a lot on the child. Every child's different. Children's stamina is different. A 5-year-old developmentally is very different from a 7-year-old. So there's a range here. But I really recommend strongly to parents that if you're going to do anything, if there's like a golden nugget to take home, or one of the golden nuggets to take home from tonight, is that if you can sit down with your child and have 20 to 30 minutes of reading time, whether you're reading to them, they're reading to you, they're listening to an audiobook, as Kendra just said, that equals reading. Just that daily piece of making a time in the day for reading, that goes a long way, because remember, it's that reading muscle. So, 8 to 10-year-olds, you're looking at 20 to 45 minutes, and then it, gets incrementally longer the time as the child gets older. So really just that daily practice makes a huge difference for a child in terms of maintenance, to sort of prevent the regression, and just to keep, maintain. Think of it as like maintaining where they left off, or trying to maintain where they left off in June at the end of the school year.
All right, so one great way to build sort of the word recognition skills, that bottom blue and green part of the reading rope, where we're just lifting words off of the page and getting them into our spoken language, is through games. So there's a ton of games out there. These are certainly not the limit of what you can use, but we pulled these together just because they're games that we've used in our classrooms and in our homes, and we've found to be successful. So the first one up in the left top corner is called Chunks. This is a great game for kids who are working on basic decoding skills. So you would use this with a student who's sort of a beginning level reader. If they're doing Orton Gillingham, this would really be like a level 1 student. And what this game does is it breaks down words into sort of the beginning sound, like in chunks, and then the ending sound, or it's called the rhyme, the unks there. And it's a word building game. So it builds both phonological awareness, so awareness of sounds, which is super important to word recognition, as well as decoding. This game is pretty expensive. It's $45. But when we share the slides on the website, that underlined title underneath the image will lead you to a link to purchase it, if you'd like to purchase it. And that's true for all of these. The next game to the right of Chunks is called Scrabble Slam. This is great for kids who are a little bit more advanced. And the way this game works is each player gets a chunk of cards. They're like Scrabble tiles, but they're in card form. So each card is a letter. And what you're doing together is making a 4-letter word, like maybe the word game, G-A-M-E, and you're using your cards to change that word into a different one just by changing one letter. So if I have the word game laid out, I could take my T card, put it over the G, and make the word tame. So you take turns making one little change to the word at a time. Just a caveat with dyslexic students, I would suggest making a edit to the rules. In the rules, you're slamming down cards as fast as you can. And with students, I found it more successful to take turns and play it at a slower pace, so everybody has some thinking time. This, I believe I got mine at Target. It's around $11, and you can also order it online. The third one in the bottom left. So Kendra is a company that produces materials for structured literacy instruction. It's a great resource. And they have a set of card games. Each card game, you can buy them individually for about $16 a piece. You can also buy them in packs of 4 to 5 games. So there's 2 sets you can purchase of those 4 to 5 games, or you can purchase them individually. The beginner set includes basic decoding concepts. So this would be great for a beginning reader, someone who's early in their structured literacy instruction. And then there's an advanced set that includes higher level decoding concepts, as well as Greek and Latin roots. If your child has that instruction in school, that's great. If you're only going to buy one, I would recommend Strawberry Smash. It's the image on the right-hand side of that row of games. It has a little strawberry on it, flexing its muscles. It's a nonsense word game that is super fun. You can play it again and again, and I found that kids really enjoy it, and they get a lot out of it in terms of developing their word recognition skills. And then the last activity on this slide is free. It's Wordle, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So I put a link to Wordle as well as Wordle Unlimited, which gives you access to as many Wordle sets as you want to play. So this game, if you're not familiar with it, you're figuring out a word based on sort of a guess and check strategy. So it will tell you whether the letters that you guessed in the first word are in the correct word or not. And this can be really fun to play with kids who are at a higher decoding level. So I really wouldn't recommend it for kids younger than 5th grade, and you want students to have, mid-level decoding skills at least. If students can do this on their own, this is a fun thing to do where you can kind of check with each other to see if you got the word each day. If they are not able to do it on their own, that's fine. You can do it with them and kind of help them along. This also, in guessing these words, it builds vocabulary. Sometimes students don't know the word that's the correct answer, and you can explain it to them. You can help them use it in a sentence. It also has a bonus of building planning and reasoning skills. So it incorporates some executive function skills, which is really important for our students. And like I said, that one is free. So another chunk of activities, these are all activities that you play with your child. Computer-based activities are also great, especially if you're busy and your child is busy and you want kind of something that's a set and forget kind of scenario, where you can have a certain time, maybe each day, where your child does this. In the summer, if you can get your child doing their reading activities in the morning, that is my strong suggestion. When they have more energy, they can check it off and get it done for the day. But these are great just if you need something that involves less involvement on your part. So the first activity on the top left is a set of apps. It's called Simplex Spelling. It's a suite of apps that you buy individually. They're about $4.99 each, and it includes 6 different apps. You purchase them depending on what your child needs. These work on word recognition, and they range in difficulty from very beginning readers. There's a CVC, that's like consonant, vowel, consonant. So words like cat or dog, all the way up to advanced decoding and spelling concepts. There is also a Phonics Lite version, which you can download for free and try first before deciding if this is something that would be appropriate for your child. I'll say I've used this with my own children. It's a really great activity if you're in a waiting room or in line or in the car, that you can just hand to your child and have them do a little bit of word recognition practice. To the right of the Simplex is Lexia. This is used in a lot of schools, but you are also able to get a home subscription. So there's 2 versions of Lexia. There's Core 5, which is for students in grades K through 5. And there's Power Up, which is for students grades 6 and up. This program, unlike Simplex, aims to cover all aspects of reading, so both word recognition and language comprehension. So it's more of a global program that covers all of the aspects of the reading rope. You do need to keep an eye on your child's progress here. So as a parent, you're expected to kind of monitor how your child is doing. There's a way to see what they're struggling in, what they're succeeding in, and it will give you some prompts to reteach weak spots and ways to teach those. This is pricey. The home subscription is $175 for the year, but Lexia was very generous and gave us a discount code that you can use after this webinar to purchase the home subscription for an annual fee of $110. And I'll share that discount code on the next slide. On the bottom left are the Nessie products. I haven't personally used them, but I've heard good things. So I put two Nessie products. One is Nessie Reading and Spelling, which is comparable to Lexia in that it addresses both word recognition and language comprehension. It's kind of a global reading program that your child can use over the summer. And the other one is Nessie Fingers. So this is spelling practice via typing instruction. So your child is practicing both typing and spelling, which is a great model to use over the summer because we're not talking a whole lot about writing in this webinar, but if your child struggles with writing, getting them typing fluently and practicing their spelling at the same time is really getting a great use of your time. So Nessie offers a free trial. The reading and spelling is $100 for the year, and the fingers is $50 for the year. And then the last computer-based activity that is on this slide is called Touch, Type, Read, and Spell. I really find this to be a hidden gem. I've had students use this and have had very great success with it over the summer. It's easy to use, it's motivating, and just like Nessie Fingers, this teaches spelling instruction through typing. It's designed for students with dyslexia and dysgraphia. This is $15 a month and you don't have to commit for a period of time. So you can sign up month to month. Dinan, you can advance it to the next slide. If you would like to take advantage of the discount code that Lexia shared with us, you can go to the link where it says Lexia Home Subscription, and that will walk you through the process of signing up. After a few pages, you'll come to this last step page. And in the renewal code box underneath where you put your billing address, you can enter that discount code that's on the screen in the yellow box.
Thank you so much, Kendra, for all those super helpful games. So what I would like to talk about now with you is coming back to this 20 to 30 minutes a day of reading. So Kendra just shared with us different games you can play, different activities. And really, I want you to think of this as 20 to 30 minutes of something. It could be, you know, one of the games. It could be a few games. It could be you reading with your child. So we're giving you different tools for the toolkit, and you can choose. And sometimes I always find that doing some reading every day, I think, is super helpful. And then, you know, bringing in the games, if your child's motivated by that, that's great. So parents often ask me when I work with parents, well, you know, how should I read with my child? Should I be reading? Should my kid be reading? Should we both be reading? And it really, the answer is it depends, and you can vary it. So here are some different tools. One is you can read to your child. Reading, and this is especially for younger children, as we said, audiobooks, reading to your child really has an impact on comprehension and oral language development. They're taking in a lot of vocabulary as you're reading to them. Another thing you can do is you can read with your child, and that's called choral reading. There's also something you can do, which is echo reading. So you read a sentence and your child repeats it. Another one that kids often really like is you read and then you stop midway in a sentence and then the child fills in the word or finishes the sentence. And what this does is that it means that your child has to be tracking, like following as you're reading, which can be really good in terms of comprehension and following along. And you can then take turns. On one page, you stop mid-sentence and they fill in the word or finish the sentence. And then on the next one, they read and they stop and you have to fill in the word. And kids love that because they get to be in sort of the teacher position and they're like, yay, like I'm trying to trick my parents. So that can be really fun. And the other piece is it's very important because we talk a lot about decoding and improving children's decoding skills. And we really want to keep in mind that rope that Kendra was talking about, which was the bottom was the word recognition strategies and the top was comprehension. You really want to integrate the two. So after a page or a few pages, ask your child questions about what you're reading. That's really key to do. Because why do we read? We read to get information. We read to, enhance our lives. We don't just read to just get words off the page. So different kinds of comprehension questions, factual questions. For example, where does the little Red Riding Hood live? Where the answer is directly in the text, and also inferential questions, which, for example, why do you think? Or, what would you give the title to, what title would you give for the next chapter? Or what do you predict is going to happen next? Those are all kinds of inferential questions, don't have a right or wrong answer, but what they do is that they encourage what we call critical thinking skills and abstract thinking, which is key in terms of enhancing children's comprehension. So another question I often get from parents is, where do I find books that are right for my child? So a really helpful strategy with this is the 5% rule. And some people call it the 5-finger rule, but the 5-finger rule is a little misleading because it depends regarding how many words are on the page. So the 5% rule means that if your child misses 5% or more of the words on a page, then the book is too hard. So for example, if there were 100 words on a page and your child missed 5 or more words, then the book is too hard for the child. So I want you to think of the 5% rule versus the 5-finger rule when you think of this. And that's it's a pretty easy number to calculate, and you can do it kind of quickly with your child to find if the book is right for your kid or not. So when we think of books, there are different kinds of books. So coming back to the rope that Kendra was saying, the bottom we had word recognition, and then the top you had comprehension. So books that are going to help with word recognition and decoding, which is like getting the words off the page, are what we call decodables. So what does a decodable mean? A decodable word means you can sound out the word. So for example, the word cat is decodable. Cat, the way it's spelled is the way it sounds. The word said, like I said hello, is what we call a sight word. If you had to spell said the way it sounds, you'd spell it S-E-D, but it's spelled S-A-I-D. So that's a sight word. So decodable books are books where the words are phonetic. If you go to your library, you can ask at your library, the librarian, where's the decodable books? They're often in the children's section. There's a decodable section. There's digital free decodables online. A great site is Flyleaf Publishing. And they start from easy decodables to harder decodables, and they're picture books and the graphics are great and it's free. Another is Learning A to Z books, and you do have to pay for this, but there are a lot of great decodables on that website too. And these are links that you can go to. So we talked about decodables, and then there are books that are not decodable, right? That were a mix of phonetic, right? Phonetically decodable words and sight words. And these are what we call trade books. So there's a website called Book Wizard, which is a great website where you can go and you find, if you know that your child is at a certain level in their reading, you can put in their level and it will come up with a list of books for your child. Another is Unite for Literacy is a great website, and it provides free digital access to picture books that include fiction and informational text or nonfiction for children to read. And there's also an option for the text to be read to the child. And this other website, which is the Seattle Bibliocommons, is great for students who, what we call high-low books. So high interest, low level of reading. And this is particularly good for middle schoolers who are struggling with reading, where you're looking for a topic that's of high interest for a middle schooler, but where the text is accessible. And this is a free, free, what we call high-low books, free books at this website, bibliocommons.com. And it's based in Seattle. And then there's another website called Epic, which some parents out there, you guys might know this. A lot of schools, kids have access to this. Schools get subscriptions for this, and there's tons and tons of books on Epic, and it's about $7 a month. And there's graphic novels and regular books and lots and lots of books. And it can be, the child can read it or it can be read to the child. And now audiobooks. So these audiobooks are great to help develop comprehension and oral language development and vocabulary. Like if you have a child who's like, I don't want to read, and who's really pushing back, have them listen to a book. That does help with their literacy skills. As Kendra told us earlier, it does count as reading. So take along audiobooks. There are two that are great. One is Learning Ally, and it's $12 a month. It is a human, like it's a human voice reading the book. Another one is Bookshare, which is free, and that is it's a robotic voice, so not as good as Learning Ally in terms of the voice, or maybe not as enjoyable, but it is free, which is great. And that's through library systems. You can get Bookshare.
Can I add a detail about Bookshare? When you go to sign up for Bookshare, it does ask you to certify that your child has a print disability. So if your child is dyslexic, they do have a print disability, and it will ask you to get a sign off. There's a form you have to fill out. It will ask you to get a sign off from a provider to certify that your child has a print disability. Your child's special education teacher or tutor or doctor or psychologist, all of them can do this for you. So don't be intimidated by that. It's easy to get.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Kendra. It's super helpful information. So some quick activities. I'm going to share some super quick activities that you could do in the car that are sort of foundational skills that reading builds on. Reading builds on these skills. And the first one is phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness, what does that mean? Basically, phonemic awareness is an awareness of sounds. So it's activities that you could do in a room with the lights out. There's no reading involved. There's no writing involved. It's a purely listening skill. And what it means is that you could do these activities like when you're in line at the grocery store or in the car. I've done these on car trips with my younger children, and it's fun. They're pretty fun. So for example, here's an example of a phonemic awareness activity. If I said b, at, blend those sounds together, what do you get? Bat. A segmenting activity would be, here's the word dog. What are the sounds in the word dog? D, a, g. You just broke that up into its individual sounds. Another one is elision, which means taking away. So if I say bat, bat. Now say bat without the b, at. So I just made you take away a sound and put the two sounds remaining together and tell me what's left. Find something that starts with k Like if you're driving in the car, find something that starts with that sound. Oh, I don't know, cattle. You probably won't see cattle on the street, but you're just having your kid sort of raise their awareness of sounds and words. The last one is rhyming. Like, well, there are many phonemic awareness activities, but these are sort of the main subsets of skills that are really helpful for kids to help them develop their reading skills. Rhyming, what rhymes with sit, bit, mit, kit, and you could have them come up with real words and nonsense words. What we have found is that working on a child's phonemic awareness skills when they're young, and even with older students, really helps their reading skills. And you can do this with kids who are like 4, even sometimes like 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. And it's great because it doesn't require any reading. So if a child is struggling with reading, there's no reading here. It's all about manipulation and awareness of sounds. I put down some resources here of games, some links with phonemic awareness games. So sort of more of what I just gave examples of. And there's also this last bullet, the last blue bullet, those are phonics worksheets. So that's connecting sounds with words, and those are great for sort of younger students. So a last piece of sort of quickie activities, sidewalk chalk. This is great. Set up a hopscotch on a sidewalk, or you could do it with large pieces of poster paper. And you could say to a child, like, jump to the letter that says ah, jump to the letter that says b, right? So this is developing basically sound symbol awareness, phonics. You could do this with sight words, right? Words like said and there and, through. I went through the door. Those are all sight words, and you could put sight words and have them jump to different sight words. Another piece is as you're reading with your child, or as a child is, listening to audiobooks, they're going to encounter a lot of vocabulary, and some of the words they're going to know, some of the words they're not going to know. Talking to your child about the meaning of words, do you know what this means? Or if they say, well, what does that word mean? And interesting words you could write down on a piece of paper and put them in a jar. You could have like a vocabulary jar. Another tool that I found that students often love is poetry. Poetry, and especially decodable poetry for kids who are struggling with reading, it can be really fun. So there's partner poems for fluency practice. So this is a link, and you can go to it, and it's basically a collection of poems that are, the theme is summer, costs $3, and it's poems that you can do like with your child, like you read one line and they read the next line and you go back and forth. Sometimes the poems have characters, so it sort of has a theater feel to it, like you're acting, and you really want the poems to be at a level of reading that is either independent or instructional for your child. You don't want it to be frustrating for your child, but you could practice it a few times and then like act it out. Some kids love theater. That can be really fun. And then there's also a book, which is on Amazon. It's called Partner Poems for Building Fluency. It's a $12 book. It's great. It's got a ton of partner poems in it, and that kids often enjoy, and they're goofy poems. They're really fun. Kids enjoy that. So now I'm going to turn it back to Kendra, who's going to share with you an awesome motivator for reading for your child in the summer.
Yeah, so I, as Dinan said at the beginning of the presentation, I'm a former special education teacher. I'm an educational consultant currently, but I also live with a dyslexic child. I have a 6th grade dyslexic child. And I have used this strategy in the classroom. I've used it as a program director for a language-based program at an independent school. And now I use it as well with my own children. So I just wanted to share it with you as a way to motivate your child, because our kids are in school all year. It's hard, it's exhausting. And sometimes you mention summer reading and they are like, my goodness, I need a break. So this is a nice way to get them a little bit excited about it, or at least willing to do the work that they need to do in order to maintain their skills. So this has 4 steps. The first step is to set a goal. You don't want to leave this as guesswork because you're busy, your child is busy, they're going to put it off, you're going to put it off. Right out from the start, set a goal of a number of books your child is going to read or an amount of time they're going to read each day. I prefer a goal that's tied to a number of books. It just takes out the step of tracking how long they're reading. And make sure that your child is involved in this. You can ask your child, how many books do you think you want to read this summer? Your child will likely, in my experience, children tend to say a ridiculously high number. So they might want to read, I want to read 50 books this year, or this summer, which is great. But we also want them to be successful. So you can say something like, I'm so excited about your enthusiasm. Let's start with a goal of 5 and see how you go. See how you do. So just, make sure that it's achievable for your child. You know your child best. The next step in this is to make a plan. So you don't want to be scrounging for books at the last minute, especially with our kids who need books at their level. That takes a little bit of work to find. So my suggestion is to make a list of books at the beginning of the summer in the same sit down as when you set this goal. You can use Dinan's resources for finding books appropriate to your child. I would suggest a mix of decodables and either audiobooks or trade books. So you're working on specific decoding skills and you're working on reading connected text. If your child is at a higher level, you can have a mix of books they're going to eye read, so read in the traditional sense, and ear read, so listen to. And you want to make sure your child has a say in which books they're reading. So read descriptions with them. Make sure that they're books that they're interested in. Summer is a time when they don't necessarily have to read books that are assigned to them. They can really explore their interests, and that's really important for them to see. It's important for them to have that motivation to put in the work it takes to become proficient decoders, because it is a lot of work for them. The other part of this plan, after you come up with your list of books, is to plan a celebration. How are we going to celebrate your achievements of completing your summer reading? So this can be simple. It can be, we're going to have an ice cream sundae party, or we're going to go out to, ice cream is on my mind. We're going to go out to ice cream, or we're going to go to the park, or to the zoo, or to the playground, or a museum, or a theme park, whatever motivates them. My children are working towards a trip to a trampoline park this summer. And the other thing you're going to do as they read is keep track of that goal. So keep track of how they're doing. As they finish a book or as they read for a chunk of time, I'm going to give you a page to use for this. It's going to have a blank thermometer on this. They're going to fill in part of that blank thermometer so that they have visibility into how they are doing in this summer reading journey that they are on, and they can really see their progress. And the fourth step is to celebrate. Do that celebration they were working towards. Set a date for it, and make sure that you follow through on it because they earned it. So Dinan, if you go to the next slide, this is something that you can print out. It's pretty simple, but you can fill in your child's name. So-and-so's summer reading list. Underneath where it says their name, you can list the books that they're committing to reading. And you can indicate if your child is going to read a mix of audiobooks and books that they read, in the traditional sense, you can indicate whether they're going to read by ear or by eye. So I have an example here. This is my daughter's. So we listed the books that she's going to read, and we indicated whether she's going to listen to them in the car or whether she's going to read them before bed. And then you can just list out along that thermometer that list of books or that amount of time that they're committing to in increments. And as they complete that increment, whether it's a book or whether it's a chunk of time, they can color in that thermometer. And you're going to put that celebration and that banner on the top of the thermometer so that they can be reminded of what they're working towards at the end of the summer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kendra. So we have come to the end of our presentation. Below is or on the slide is our contact information. You are welcome to reach out to us if you have, we're going to have a little Q&A session in a minute, but if you have other questions that come up, feel free to reach out to us. And before we have our Q&A session, I'm going to have, I know Joanna wants to share an awesome research study opportunity that is happening at MGH. So I'm going to let her choose, I'm going to let her speak about that.
Thank you. This is an invitation to the community. My research team at the MGH Institute of Health Professions, we're hosting a virtual study, so you can join from anywhere. We're inviting families whose children have just finished grades 4, 5, or 6. And we're especially interested in having students with reading difficulties, whether or not it's diagnosed. It's okay if there's co-occurring issues with attention and or a diagnosis with ADHD. If you're interested, there's a link on this slide that you could enter your interest. You can also contact me directly with any questions you might have. So thank you for considering. Hope to see you through that option or otherwise. And now with just a minute or two to spare, maybe we can cover some of the questions people have shared.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure. So I will share. We have a few great questions. The first question is from Nancy, and it says, she said, how do you figure out what level your child is at in their reading?
So I'll jump in. That's a great question. So one of the things that I would do is I would actually, a starting point is I would actually reach out to your child's teacher. Often schools do middle, beginning, end of the year sort of benchmarking for reading, and children sort of have, there's levels of reading that children are sort of, and sometimes it follows the alphabet, where, you know, the teacher can say, oh, your child's at, you know, this level, level E or level A or level B. And if you go to a library, and this has to do with, sorry, trade books. This is not like decodables. Has to do with trade books. And at the library, they can like show you what section. The other piece that I would use is what I call the 5% rule. So for example, let's say your child's in first grade or second grade. I would go to the library and say, oh, you know, can you show me like books that are like a second grade or, you know, depending on the grade of your child, you know, can you show me, you know, where those books are? And I would sit down with your child and have them read a page to you and see if they miss more than 5%, 5 or more % of the words, then that book is too hard. And I would really ask the librarian to sort of help guide you. And especially if your child is really struggling, I would go to the decodable section of the library and start, and usually they're from like easy to more harder decodables, and start with that. I find decodables to be extremely successful with younger children who are really struggling, because kids, when they are able to read the book, they feel a sense of success. And even if it's a simple book, they're so excited and happy. And they're like, yes, I read a book. Like there's a real sense of empowerment. So I don't know if Kendra or Joanna, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, just a note about the decodables. You know, like you said, they tend to be organized from easy to hard, or low level decoding concepts to high level decoding concepts. If you're not sure where your child is in terms of their decoding development, which is completely reasonable, I would start at the easier side of things and move up from there. If you get to a situation where they're missing 5% or more of the words on a page in their decodable, again, you've reached a point that's too hard, that's probably going to be frustrating for them. And you probably don't want to hit over the summer. You're not giving them instruction. So I would slide back to something that they're between 95 and 100% accurate with.
Just one compliment to those great ideas is most of what we're sharing here is about when we have kids reading solo. So if they're on their own reading independently, then you want them to be able to do so with enough ease that they can understand what they've read. But if your child's interest draws them to materials that are beyond their level, and that might even be their grade level, but they can't quite access that independently, this is where the conversations earlier support doing so with your child, doing it together, reading it to them, having audiobooks, or any of those other strategies mentioned earlier. So that's how we kind of cover the range of different opportunities for engaging with books with different purposes.
We had a couple of questions about the presentation slides and whether this will be available as a recording.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I meant to mention that at the end too. Yes, so the slides are going to be posted on our website in the next few days. If you go to the Massachusetts Branch International Dyslexia Association website, they will be posted under, there's a tab at the top that says resources, and we're going to create a link there that will say, you know, summer support for your child's reading, and this presentation will be there. We'll also post it under events. There's a tab that says events, and we'll post the slides there. With regards to the recording, that will be posted on our website next week, early mid next week, just because of the tech piece takes a little bit of time. But the recording will also be posted on our website and also on YouTube, on our YouTube channel.
We got some great tips from Danielle, just adding to the information that we presented. One of them was about the importance of clipping sounds. So she mentioned that good tip for parents, when you're saying a sound, when you're doing those phonemic awareness activities with a child, if you're saying the words in bat, for example, you want to make sure you're saying b-at instead of ba-a-ta, right? So you're clipping that sound instead of ba, you're saying b. And that really helps develop your child's reading more accurately than getting that extra gobbledygook at the end of the sound. And she also noted, also parents, please remember we level books, not children. This is very true. And actually, you know, we do encourage you to find out your child's informal reading level from school, but also remember that that is not set in stone. Your child can, there's definitely wiggle room in there, and you don't want your child to be bound to that reading level for sure. There's also there's some research about the inconsistencies between leveling systems. So it's a good starting place, but it's certainly not the be all and end all of what your child can read. All right, and then we have one more interesting question from Lex. He said, we developed a real-time text-to-song transition app. We show a benefit for comprehension, concentration, and enjoyment. And for students that are reluctant writers, the enjoyment of hearing their written words as a song. So it sounds like this translates written words into song. Appreciate your thoughts regarding the value of music and song for students with dyslexia and other learning impairments.
Yeah, I mean, I think connecting music, the music side of our brain, with regards to literacy is fantastic. I do think that a lot of students with reading disabilities are often, and I don't want to generalize, and every child is different, but are often very musical, artistic, very strong visual learners. And it's a different part of the brain. Music is in a different part. It's that right hemispheric piece of the brain. And you know, building connections, it's like building the neurological connections is great. And yeah, I mean, those are my personal thoughts about the music and reading and writing.
I'll add too that our dyslexic students often struggle with memory, and music can be an incredible way to help them remember information that they've learned or information that they would otherwise struggle to remember, especially what we call non-meaningful information. So anything rote, like facts or dates or just anything they would otherwise struggle to recall on their own. All right, that is all of our questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. And as Dinan said, these slides will be up available on our website, as well as the recording. And please do feel free to reach out to any of us with questions that you have regarding your child's summer reading at home.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it, and we hope that this was helpful.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Happy summer.
Bye. Bye-bye.